Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee and Headlines, our morning get together live here on Facebook. Let me get this a little closer to my mouth. My levels seem to be a little bit on. Oh, no, they're fine. They're fine. Yay. So, yesterday, as I suspected, Facebook decided to play a practical joke, not intentionally, I'm sure, but the problems that we had pre announcing our broadcast to Facebook yesterday were not isolated. Apparently, the entire blogging and live streaming community was a little taken aback over the fact that Facebook changed some settings. Maybe they informed people, maybe not, but the bottom line is that we're back running our business as usual this morning. This is Thursday, October 26th, and of course, this is Coffee and Headlines. It's a pleasure to be with you here as we take a look at headlines from our city, our state, and our country, as we take a look at your comments. Lars says, let's do the hustle today. Oh, we will do the hustle this afternoon at the Joint Hotel. I'm so excited about the disco presentation. It's going to be a blast. And yes, if anybody wants to get up and do a little dancing, sure, why not? You know, disco music is not necessarily the most interesting thing to enjoy while you're sitting at a lecture or a presentation. But I've done a lot of research, and I'm sure that it's going to be very, very, very fun and interesting. But I do not want to get ahead of myself. I see a lot of your comments about Acapulco. Yes, it's really sad what's going on down there. We'll touch base about that in the broadcast momentarily. But first, as always, I wish to welcome everyone here this morning. Whether you're watching live right now, whether you're watching later on YouTube, and please don't forget to, subscribe and like, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't remember. And of course, if you're watching live for the first time, we'd love to give you a nice little welcome. We can do that if you write the word new in your comment, and we'll be so happy to give you a nice little hello. And if there's something really important that you wish to share with everybody else, it helps a great deal if you add a capital letter Q at the beginning of your comment. Hola, Larcito, says Daniel. I love it. Daniel, thank you so much for your hand holding this morning and yesterday. I kind of knew it was a Facebook thing. You confirmed it. Of course, you are in the business of big corporate streaming, so it is a pleasure to have you holding my hand as we do this. And as long as we're talking about Daniel, Daniel and I are partnering on a little pilot adventure, which we're going to do in January. One of the things that I've always wanted to do, and I should be talking about this later on. We'll get into the news in a second, but right before we get into the news, I just want to tell you that Daniel, who has a lot of expertise, that's what his company does. He produces live streaming events at a corporate level. So Daniel and I are traveling somewhere with a bunch of other friends, and he's bringing his portable internet receiver satellite internet receiver. I call it his Elon, but it's the Space Link. It's called Chingadera. And we're going to try to do coffee and headlines remotely from a little town that we're going to visit in January. So it'll be fun. And of course, it inspires me, if we are successful, to maybe invest in one of these little portable satellite chingaderas so that I can bring it along with me in my travels and and show you more of Mexico, which excites me very much. One last comment before we get started, and this is just because this is the kind of comment that I love. Thanks for the recommendation of the Fandango Mariachi yesterday. It was a fantastic evening. Saul or Saul, I don't know how you pronounce your name, but every time anyone makes a connection here at Coffee and Headlines, whether it is between two or more cluster members or whether it is that you're connecting with a place or an event, you totally make my day. And with that said, let us take a look at the news to see what's going on. Of course, we have to lead with Acapulco, where things are truly bad. 27 people have been found dead so far, and 4 more are unaccounted for after Hurricane Otis hit the city yesterday at midnight as a Category 5 hurricane. As images and video are beginning to circulate in the online, the amount of damage continues to reveal itself as time goes by, and it's just absolutely devastating. How fortunate we should consider yourselves that we haven't had one of these in a very, very long time. And of course, to dive into this, if you want to look into what went on, here is also a link to an article in English published by The Guardian that will dive into more detail, should you wish to consider that. We do have good news, and if you look at this photo and you don't recognize what we're looking at, we are looking at the brand new floating docks that were built adjacent to the maritime terminal here in Puerto Vallarta at the Las Piedras dock to service local fishermen and small tourism vessels. And of course, the icing on the cake is that according to this news item, all is set in place and the local fishing community is pleased with the way the project turned out. We mentioned this because you may recall that when the state government announced that they were going to overhaul that area, of course, local fishermen who have been there for the longest time were wondering, well, what's going to happen to us, as their being there was not necessarily the most formalized operation. So the docks are finished and everybody seems to be happy. So this is not a publicly accessible area unless you happen to be going on a trip. But this is definitely a nice accomplishment. We had a little bit of a glimpse of it a few months ago when we were invited to go on a local a boating trip around the bay. It's really beautiful. Let us turn over to the weather forecast before we continue. And as you can see, weather forecast is feeling snarky this morning. It says, I was really pulling for George Santos to win the G. I don't know if it's gavel or gavel. I've never really used that word, and I hope I never have to use it. It is 27 degrees right now. Humidity is at 66%. Our temperature in Fahrenheit degrees is 81, and our weather forecast for today. Okay, I pushed the wrong button. I won't do it again. The weather forecast for today tells us that it's going to be humid with mostly clear skies, but a few clouds may be wandering around. A high of 31 and a low of 23, barely any chance of rain. Tomorrow, Friday, clear skies in the morning with rain in the afternoon, but only a chance of rain of 20%, says our weather forecast. A high of 31 and a low of 22. And on Saturday, we'll enjoy mostly clear skies in the morning with rain in the afternoon, a higher chance of rain at 41%, and a high of 31 and a low of 23. Moving right along, yesterday we were looking for an event for the Olas Altas Farmers Market. And of course, we didn't find one because whatever it is that they published, the event name is Nueva Temporada 2023-2024 or New Season 2023-24, which, if you ask me, is probably not the best title for an event. So hopefully, for their own sake, they will update the title of the event to what it is: Olas Altas Farmers Market. Why? Well, because if I'm looking for information online and I do a search for the market, I'm not going to be looking for Nueva Temporada. I'm going to be looking for Olas Altas Farmers Market. But, who am I to comment on these things? I have good news for those of you living in Bahía de Banderas, north of our border with the state of Nayarit. A Raicilla, Mezcal, and Artisanal Beer Festival has been announced to take place at the La Cruz de Guanacaxtle Marina on November 18 and 19. This coincides with Mexico's El Buen Fin event, which, as you know, this is Mexico's, Good Friday or Black Friday equivalent from the United States. Last year's Artisanal Beer Festival, the Artisanal Beer Festival was enjoyed by over 4,500 visitors. So organizers are looking forward to a good turnout for this year's event. And I found their Facebook page so that you can follow it if you'd like to. And next, I found before we go into the opinion pieces, let's tackle this one. One of my favorite music-related blogs that I follow on a regular basis is World Music Central, as they feature great articles on ethnic music from all over the world. And this time around, they have published an excellent piece featuring videos of several bands that play jarocho-style son. This is instrumental music that people dance to, but it also has some singing. So I recommend this article for anyone that is interested in traditional Mexican music. Of course, here in the state of Jalisco, where mariachi is king and where mariachi is from, we hear a lot of mariachi, but elsewhere in the country, there are other beautiful musical expressions that are just waiting for you to discover. And last but not least, before we get into our comment section, I have two articles that I read online that I would like to react to. The first one has to do with this Querétaro-based U.S. blogger who has published a video titled something along the lines of 25 reasons why moving to Mexico may be a bad idea. And among other things, he comments adversely on the fact that cities such as Puerto Vallarta do not collect their garbage properly. And I have to tell you, why am I looking at this when I want to be looking at something else? Let me switch views. There you go. I want to tell you, I don't know that I'm going to read his article, and I'm sure he's going to get a lot of shade from national Mexicans or Mexican nationals, whatever, but I find it interesting that, and here's a cultural fact about Mexico. It's like we can complain about our own things over and over, and the government may or may not pay attention, but let a foreigner comment on things that are wrong, and then everybody pays attention. Now, the people that pay attention may say rationally, well, that is correct. Hopefully the government will pay attention to this and will act accordingly. Or Mexican nationals may act irrationally and say, who the fuck are you to be commenting on things that happen in our country? I am not subscribing to the latter. I'm subscribing to the former. It is unfortunate in these instances that it takes a stern comment from someone who is from elsewhere to point out the deficiencies of, in this case, our city, for the press to take notice. So the press has taken notice. Hopefully, our government will take notice, because the problem about trash collection in Puerto Vallarta is not new. and it certainly hasn't gone away, and we sure hope that it will. And the second article that I want to comment on, this one is an opinion piece that was presented in English by Mexico News Daily, and it is titled, "Is it okay for foreigners to paint their face with the calavera on Day of the Dead?" It was written by Gabriela Solis, I believe is her name, and she talks in the article about how she lived in Dubai, and she gives her opinion um, on whether you are doing cultural appropriation or not. And I think the article is a must read for anyone that is concerned about these types of things. It is worth remembering something really important here. Day of the Dead is ancient. I mean, I'm talking the tradition of Day of the Dead is pre-Hispanic ancient. Did the Aztec paint their faces with a Catrina face, the skull face? They did not. When you consider the fact that the Catrina, the skull, is barely over 100 years old. The Catrina came to life thanks to an illustration created by Mexican artist Jose Guadalupe Posada. And of course, the movies, there was a Bond film, and then there was Coco, and it was these two movies that spearheaded the Catrina into the limelight. And now all of a sudden, everybody wants to paint their faces as a Catrina or as a skull for Day of the Dead. So are you doing cultural appropriation when you are a foreigner and you paint your face? I don't think so. In fact, I think it's great because, death is universal. We just honor it differently here in Mexico. And that's, to me, that's the key word, honoring. Because one thing is to go out and say, well, I'm going to pretend, that I'm going to be a Catrina without really knowing or understanding the tradition behind it, which is basically we honor our deceased. And another thing is to actually have a little bit of cultural immersion in what the holiday is about. So that reminds me very much about my 19 years living in the United States. I always enjoyed Thanksgiving living in the States because it seemed to be at the time an occasion that is simply designed to gather friends and loved ones and have a nice meal. Of course, that may be naive, or that may have been naive on my part, as in latter years I did more research and I read more about who was the good guy or who was not the good guy, and all I can say is, I view Thanksgiving with a different focal lens nowadays. So I'm curious about your comments. I'm curious about how you feel about all of this. The bottom line is, of course, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of cultural context as to what Day of the Dead is all about. And of course, I have to do a shameless plug. We are going to have a great opportunity to discover this on my Day of the Dead presentation, which will take place on Wednesday, November 1st at the Joint Boutique Hotel and Co-work. It'll be a lot of fun to unpack more of these cultural traditions so that you can have a better appreciation as to why we do what we do during Day of the Dead. The end. Let us take a quick look at your comments as we continue with our broadcast. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, and yes, of course, today is disco this afternoon. It's going to be a lot of fun. Boom, 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 boom. I see many good mornings, which I very much appreciate as always. Lots of comments of Acapulco. Let us send good vibes. And, as soon as relief efforts are announced or opportunities to contribute, let us all do whatever we can. Let's see. Luisa says, remote Paco show. Can I be your assistant? Well, I have to check with I have to check with Daniel. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be fun. Let's see. Cheryl says, I didn't catch it. Where are the floating docks? Well, Cheryl, that's the beautiful thing about Coffee and Headlines. You see, every time we broadcast, we share the news. And every time we share the news, we include the links to the news in the show notes. So you have three options. You can ask the question you just asked, and some kind person may or may not answer your question. Number two, you can check the show notes, which will have the link to the news item that I mentioned, and you can find out the answer for yourself. Or number three, you can rewind or watch the broadcast again, and hopefully you'll be able to find the answer to your question. Let's see what else we have. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. No, we're not going to get into U.S. politics, as tempting as it is. Oh, interesting, Saul. Thank you very much for that comment, that the Fandango Mariachi will hopefully become a regular event. Hopefully it will, and hopefully they will advertise it in a timely manner so that we can all enjoy it if we can. That particular blogger is trash, says Pat Reese. I hope that is a pun, because I actually don't mind when people trash something, no pun intended, but they are correct. I mean, this guy is telling the truth. I mean, I haven't seen the piece, but if this guy is commenting on the quality of trash collection in Puerto Vallarta, oy, 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 it is nothing good to talk about. Luisa says, this is a hard question, because as a Mexican, I still don't know all the history about my culture, but at the end, if people are happy and respectful, that is more important. Well, Luisa, join the club, because you and I are Mexican. I don't know all the stories. I don't know all the culture, but I try to be a little mindful of this and try to spend some time on a regular basis trying to immerse myself better so that I can, in turn, help you immerse better here at Coffee and Headlines. So don't see that as a flaw. Quite the contrary. Continue to be curious and let us learn together everything we can. Albert comments, I love the way Mexico honors the dead. It is so much healthier than how most other cultures do it. I have to agree with that, and I can't wait. Purim pum pim pum pum. Let's see what else we have. Purim pam pum pam pum. I think Mihal says the bump. Who remembers the bump? I remember the bump. We'll definitely be reminiscing this afternoon during our disco presentation. And I think this brings us to the end of your comments, which, as always, I am so grateful for, and I'm grateful for your company here at Coffee and Headlines. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'm grateful for the fact that things seem to be resolved technically in the world of live streaming on Facebook. And of course, tomorrow we will be back for more news, more headlines, more comments. So between now and then, have an amazing day wherever you are. Take care.